United Nations Secretary General believes the people of Syria could seize a historic opportunity to build a stable and peaceful future. António Guterres weighed in after news of the fall of Syria's longtime leader Bashar Al-Assad at the hands of a swift takeover of the country by rebel forces and the Assad family's subsequent asylum in Russia. He said the future of Syria was a matter for Syrians to determine and that his special envoy, Geir Pedersen, would be working with them towards that end. As Sherwin Bryce-Pease reports from New York, the Security Council is expected to convene an emergency closed consultation at the request of the Russian Federation later today. All right, Sherwin joins us now with the very latest. Sherwin, quite a lot has been happening today. Let's just start with this meeting that we're expecting around 10 p.m. our time in a closed-door discussion on Syria. What are some of the early takeaways and what might we expect to be discussed there?
Well, I think this is a fact-finding endeavor by the UN Security Council. I think the broad narrative, Mfundo, from the very quick nature of the rebel advance on Damascus that culminated in the overthrow of the Assad regime and them fleeing for asylum in Russia happened quite swiftly. You heard similar sentiments from US President Joe Biden. And so generally, the 15 members of the Council will be seeking information. They will be briefed by two UN Undersecretaries General, one for political and peace-building affairs, Rosemary DiCarlo, and then the USG for peace operations. So really to explain what has happened, what the status quo is, what the situation is on the ground, but really also to understand who is now in charge of Syria and what those engagements might look like. I asked both the US ambassador and the Chinese ambassador on their way into the UN Security Council earlier this morning what we might expect in the meeting later today. I don't know if we have those clips lined up, but if we do, we can certainly go to them now.
We have a dynamic situation going on in the region. I mean, I think all of us saw this weekend. Well, I mean, what a 360 it has been it is today from what it was, last week. So the Syrian people deserve a lot of credit. This is all about them. Let's see where it unfolds, where all this is going to end. But from the U.S. perspective, we've got three primary interests we want to see. And one is making sure, frankly, that our soldiers and personnel and all are protected. We want to make sure that our allies are safe and secure. And we want to make sure that there isn't a humanitarian catastrophe. And so we're going to be working over the coming days and weeks to try to make sure that we can ensure all of those things happen. But we'll see. It's a very dynamic situation. It could be very different by 3 p.m. today.
We are following the situation very closely and we want to see the situation stabilized. And we hope that an inclusive political process can be started. I emphasize it should be inclusive and all sides should take the fundamental interest of the people of Syria as a priority and try to seek a political solution that is acceptable to all.
And Mfundo, also good to sort of just reflect on what the UN Secretary General and other UN officials have been warning now for more than a year, since before the situation in Gaza unfolded as it has after the October 7th attacks last year. And what they have consistently said is that there will be a multiplier effect. The one conflict is going to affect another conflict and create a destabilizing effect in the region. And so what we've seen from conflicts in Ukraine that has weakened Russia's desire to continue to shore up the Assad government in Syria. We see similar iterations in relation to Hezbollah's conflict with Israel in Lebanon. They too are weakened and have historically also shored up the Assad regime. So the appetite there, based on the other conflicts, be that in Ukraine, be that in Lebanon and in Gaza, have weakened some of the biggest backers of the Assad government in terms of their resolve to continue to protect them. And that's why we've so very quickly seen his government unravel and his family flee to Moscow for asylum.
And that is a general sentiment. Many commentators are saying really what happened here is that Russia could no longer assist because they had their own hands full with the Ukrainian war currently. So it was not going to be possible to divide their attention. And that's why it was so easy for this rebel group to just swiftly take over power. But now, while Moscow has now confirmed that the Assad family has been given asylum in the Russian Federation, one of the main rebel groups responsible for their demise is a UN-sanctioned sanctioned terrorist group previously linked to Al-Qaeda. How much more complicated would it be for the international community to engage with a formation that is literally sanctioned by the Security Council?
I mean, South Africans have said for a very long time, Mfundo, that one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter. And I think this is what the international community is now going to grapple with when they look at the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham group that is essentially one of the key rebel groups and power brokers in any future iteration of a Syrian government. The US president speaking on Sunday, Joe Biden, said some rebel groups that took down the Assad regime have their own grim record of terrorism and human rights abuses. We have taken note of their statements in recent days, and they're saying the right things now. We will assess not just their words, but their actions, right? And so it is going to be incumbent on the international community not to ignore this group, but to engage with them, whether they've been designated as a terrorist organization or not. And this is something echoed by the US alternate ambassador, Robert A. Wood, when I asked him this question earlier today. Watch.
They're foreign terrorists, designated terrorist organizations, so it does impact, but there are different channels that we have in terms of communicating with the various factions, and we're going to do that in order to try to best protect our interests in Syria right now. But it's a very dynamic situation, but we cannot forget the importance that this is for the Syrian people who have had to deal with, decades of just repression, abuse, and they are now free from that. We want to make sure that that continues.
And so very much the focus now is going to be on the UN's mediation role. Geir Peterson is the special envoy appointed by the UN Secretary General on the Syria file. He's been in that position since about 2019. But this, Mfundo, has been a long and uphill battle. He is not the first Syrian envoy. He follows in the footsteps of the late UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, who was the first envoy appointed in 2012. Lakhdar Brahimi, the former foreign minister of Algeria, took over the role until 2014. Staffan de Mistura then took over between 2014 and 2019, and you now have Geir Peterson, and that really speaks to just how complicated this peace process has been. He has sought to constitute a constitutional committees from all the factions in Syria to negotiate a new constitution that could now lead to elections. But as the US alternate ambassador Robert A. Wood said there, this is a very fluid situation. No one really knows how this ends. It's going to be for the international community to remain engaged, and certainly for violence to be tempted, humanitarian relief to be upscaled in Syria, and then we will begin to see how the chips may fall. But right now, anybody telling you that they know how this is going to go is probably fibbing on live television, Mfundo.
They possibly are. It is a very fluid situation. I mean, just speaking a bit earlier on to our Russian correspondent, it seemed even President Putin there was just monitoring what's happening. He isn't antagonistic towards this new regime. He's just almost just waiting to see if there can be any relationship, especially with at least their civilians still inside Syria. But thank you very much for that wrap. That is Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News correspondent, speaking to us there.